What happens when the most valuable franchise in women's basketball actively turns against its own superstar? Not in some subtle, behind-the-scenes kind of way. Not in whispered hallway conversations or passive-aggressive coaching adjustments. No, on national television, in front of millions, with cameras rolling and the whole basketball world watching every single second. That is exactly what is unfolding right now in Indianapolis, and honestly, the more you dig into this, the worse it gets. We are not talking about one bad game. We are not talking about a minor coaching disagreement or some normal in-game tension that flares up and disappears by the next practice. This is a pattern. A deeply troubling, fully documented pattern of dysfunction that has now spiraled into viral arguments, trade rumors involving the Los Angeles Sparks, an injury reporting controversy that got the WNBA itself involved, and a media manipulation strategy so transparent it is almost insulting. The Indiana Fever just dropped to 5-5 after their first 10 games of the 2026 regular season, including a brutal collapse against the defending champion New York Liberty. The Liberty tightened their defense late and erased a double-digit second-half deficit to hand Indiana the loss. Before that, they suffered a 16-point blowout loss to the expansion Portland Fire, a brand-new team that had absolutely no business putting up 100 points on a supposed championship contender. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, the superstar guard and her head coach went viral for a heated argument that the entire WNBA community is still debating. This franchise was supposed to dominate. This roster was built to compete for a title. Instead, they are sinking into a spiral that gets uglier by the week, and nobody in that front office seems willing to face the truth. But we are. Today, we are pulling back every layer of this mess and showing you exactly what is going on inside the Indiana Fever. And trust me, what is coming next is far worse than what you have already seen. Let's rewind to the Portland game because the timeline here is absolutely critical. Indiana dropped to 4-4 in the 2026 WNBA season after a lopsided loss against the Portland Fire. Let that sink in for a moment. 100 points, scored by an expansion team, against a roster loaded with all-stars, veterans, and the most electrifying player in the league. The game started perfectly. Indiana came out sharp. Caitlin Clark was locked in from the opening tip, and the Fever were building momentum. Then, with over 6 minutes left in the opening frame, Stephanie White pulled Clark, Lexie Hull, and Aaliyah Boston all at once. Indiana was leading at the time. By the time the quarter ended, Portland was ahead by 14. That is a complete reversal. That is a franchise-altering stretch of basketball caused by one decision. Data shows the Portland matchup marked the earliest Clark checked out this season, coming off the floor at just 3.5 minutes in. White later claimed she was following her typical substitution pattern, but the timing and the result told a completely different story. She pulled her 3 best players off the floor while they were winning, handed the game to a bench unit that was clearly not ready, and watched the entire thing fall apart. Portland went on a dominant run. The energy vanished. The crowd shifted. The Fever never recovered. Indiana was blown out, with no one on the team posting a big enough performance to even make a dent in the deficit. But the substitution was only half the story. What happened next on that sideline is what really set the internet on fire. And the footage, it is absolutely damning. The exchange between Clark and White occurred during a timeout in the second quarter. Neither White nor Clark revealed what triggered the heated moment. Both were visibly upset during the exchange, and then White subbed out Clark for rookie Raven Johnson. Clark got out of her seat and shook her head, clearly frustrated. The video made the rounds on social media instantly and prompted a flood of reactions unlike anything the WNBA had seen in years. A fan in the stands captured the whole thing on their phone, and once it hit social media, there was no containing it. Watch the footage closely and you see something deeply uncomfortable. White was addressing the team during a timeout with Clark sitting directly in front of her. White appeared to be making a point, jabbing her finger in the air in Clark's direction while continuing to speak. Clark outstretched her arms to the side before raising them, which looked to mimic a defensive-type position. The two-time All-Star later stood up, moved behind White, and shook her head. This was not some minor disagreement that cameras happened to catch at the wrong angle. This was a full-blown confrontation, broadcasted in high definition, seen by millions of fans who had no trouble reading the body language. And the result was immediate. Clark was yanked from the game for a rookie with limited high-pressure experience. She ended up finishing with just 6 points on 1 of 7 shooting in only 22 minutes of action. One of the most dynamic scorers in league history, held to 6 points in 22 minutes. Let that number sit with you for a second. The reaction was instant and fierce. Veteran analyst Jason Whitlock lambasted White, claiming that she and Fever defensive assistant Brian January had intentionally sabotaged Clark with the early substitution. His exact characterization: that in the history of basketball, no superstar player has ever been subbed out after just a few minutes of excellent playmaking. Former players weighed in. Analysts questioned the logic. Cheryl Miller addressed it on NBC's WNBA coverage. The whole thing became the single biggest story in women's basketball within hours. But while everyone was debating the footage, something even more calculated was quietly being put into motion behind the scenes. Something that would shift this entire situation from messy to manipulative. And it started with two people sitting in front of microphones, trying to make you believe everything was fine. 2 days after the Portland disaster, both Clark and White sat in front of the media and essentially tried to kill the story. Their approach was coordinated, calm, and clearly rehearsed. Every answer felt designed to make this controversy disappear as quickly as possible. Clark told reporters they are just two competitive people who want to win, noting the team was in the midst of a lopsided loss that dropped them to 4-4. She acknowledged the camera is always on her, and pointed out that many people in the media and on television think they know a lot of things but are just blatantly wrong. Then came the emotional hammer, the one quote clearly designed to shut the entire debate down. Clark said that when she got hurt last year at the Connecticut game, she bawled in Steph's arms. That Stephanie White is somebody she will ride for the rest of her life, and that people who just sit on their phones all day do not see those moments. Strong words, genuine emotion. You can tell she meant every bit of it, but here is the thing. Just because two people genuinely care about each other does not mean the professional relationship is functioning. You can love your coach and still be trapped in a system that is actively limiting your potential. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, and the on-court results make that impossible to ignore. White matched Clark's energy, describing what happened as simply a coach challenging a player. She then added that she does not think it often becomes an issue when it happens in men's sports. That last line immediately drew scrutiny. Instead of addressing the actual basketball decision, she pivoted to a framing that shifted the blame onto the audience for reacting at all. White went further, calling the entire story a product of sensationalism from people trying to get clicks, suggesting that Clark's enormous profile guarantees this kind of overblown reaction to something completely ordinary. Both sides dismissed it. Both said move on. And under normal circumstances, the media cycle might have shifted. But then the front office made a decision that ripped this whole thing wide open again. They sent someone else to the microphone. Someone with real credibility. Someone whose relationship with the franchise's biggest star gives every word she says more weight than a press release ever could. And the way they used that relationship reveals exactly what kind of organization is running this team. Enter Lexie Hull, one of the most respected players on the roster, a genuinely beloved teammate, and one of Caitlin Clark's closest friends on the team. The Fever guard spoke out after the heated exchange between Clark and White broke the internet, and the front office made sure she was front and center delivering the message they needed the public to hear. Hull made it clear that no one on the team is fixated on the controversy. She attributed the confrontation to pure game frustration, pointing out that the opposing team was trying to target Clark defensively and that the tension was just a natural reaction to a rough situation. She framed it as a normal occurrence in competitive basketball, and then she pivoted to what the team needs going forward. Hull talked about the team needing to go into every single game with a kill mindset. She spoke about not being the ones to get punched first and asserting themselves before the opposition sets the tone. Then came the statement that set the bar as high as it could possibly go. Hull looked directly into the camera and said that by the end of the year, a championship is definitely the end goal, and that they will all be very disappointed if that does not happen. Championship or bust. Those are powerful words. But they land differently when the team is sitting at 5-5. Their defense is among the worst in the league, and their franchise player is coming off one of the worst stretches of her young career. Words matter, but the results on the court matter more. Now, the big question. Was this a genuine teammate standing up for her squad, or was Hull strategically positioned by the front office as a PR buffer? Someone with enough credibility and emotional connection to Clark that the "everything is fine" narrative would actually land. Every answer Hull gave was measured. Every deflection was smooth. Every pivot pointed away from the coaching staff and toward team unity and trust. Hull described how the team is attacking difficult conversations head-on through film sessions, team meetings, and small group discussions. She painted a picture of a close, honest group working through adversity together. That sounds great on paper, but it is a lot harder to believe when you watch the same team blow double-digit leads, collapse defensively, and fight with each other on national television. And the really uncomfortable truth: everything Hull said might be completely sincere. She might genuinely believe every word of it. She might genuinely love the coaching staff and trust the process. But that does not change the fact that when this franchise needed someone to face the media firestorm, it was not the head coach who stepped up. It was not the general manager who took accountability. It was a player, a friend. And that tells you everything about how this organization handles a crisis. But here is the thing. The Portland game and the sideline argument are just the surface level of what is really wrong with this team. Underneath all of it is a basketball problem so fundamental that no press conference, no friendly interview, and no carefully worded soundbite can fix it. Strip away the drama. Ignore the viral clips. Forget the social media firestorm for a second. Just look at what is happening on the basketball court, because the court does not lie, and what it is showing right now is a team at war with its own identity. The Fever are the highest scoring team in the league, and Clark is averaging a career high in points per game. On offense, this team can flat out score. The firepower is undeniable, but here is where it all falls apart. The team ranks second from last in scoring defense, trailing only the Los Angeles Sparks. And that defensive crisis has a very specific explanation. Teams have figured out the blueprint. They are attacking Clark in isolation on the defensive end, running play after play directly at her, and forcing her to guard bigger, stronger players one-on-one. In just a 4-game stretch, Clark defended more isolation possessions than any player in the league over a 4-game span in the past 3 seasons. She is being hunted on every possession, and the coaching staff has done almost nothing to hide her or adjust the defensive scheme to compensate. Opposing offenses have built their entire game plan around exploiting that mismatch. In the blowout loss to Portland, the Fire scored at will by attacking Indiana's defensive rotations over and over again. The same blueprint showed up against the Liberty, who erased a huge deficit in the final 12 minutes by doing exactly what Portland did. And it goes deeper than the defense. Before the season even began, White publicly announced her plan to use Clark off the ball more frequently in an effort to create easier opportunities for the star. Some fans immediately read that as taking the ball out of Clark's hands rather than maximizing her strengths. The tension around that decision was already brewing before tip-off of Game 1. Then Clark exploded for a career performance against the Washington Mystics, dropping a season high and forcing overtime with a dramatic buzzer beater. Despite carrying the team offensively, in one of the most electric individual performances of the WNBA season. White chose to focus on the team's collective effort in her post-game interview rather than giving the credit directly where it was due. Read that again. Your franchise player has the game of her life, and your head coach won't publicly acknowledge it. That is not humble coaching. That is a power dynamic playing out in real time. Fans noticed. They always do. They notice every time Clark gets diminished in the narrative, every time the system fights against her strengths, and every time the coaching staff steps around a direct question about their best player. Then came the injury controversy that most media outlets glossed right over. Reports surfaced that the Fever listed Clark as out at the last minute for a game, violating the league's injury reporting protocols. The WNBA stepped in and issued a formal warning directly to the franchise. White tried to defend the handling publicly, but the league was not having any of it. It was another example of an organization operating carelessly with its single most important asset, and then acting surprised when they get called out for it. Clark herself is now in a genuine shooting slump, averaging just over 10 points per game on under 30% shooting from the field over her last 3 contests. The best scorer in the league is misfiring at an alarming rate. And through all of this, instead of the coaching staff absorbing the criticism and adjusting their approach, the franchise keeps leaning on players to manage the public narrative. Meanwhile, the losses are piling up. The trade rumors are getting louder. And the story is about to take a turn that nobody in Indianapolis saw coming. Since the start of the WNBA season, speculation around Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever has been simmering just under the surface. Stephanie White's team got off to a disappointing start. The viral sideline argument with their franchise player made international headlines, and the narrative that something was broken inside this organization kept gaining momentum. Then, right on cue, the loudest rumor in the league dropped like a bomb. Lakers legend Mitchell Thompson went on social media and posted that he was hearing from a reliable source that the Fever no longer want Caitlin Clark, and urgently called on the Los Angeles Sparks to go get her. That post exploded instantly. Millions of views, thousands of reactions, comments flooding in from fans, analysts, and former players across the entire sports world. Before the dust could settle, veteran sports personality Jason Whitlock stepped in to back the claim, stating that the Fever were actively planning to ship Clark to the Sparks. Now, full transparency, because this is important. Neither Thompson nor Whitlock cover the WNBA on a regular basis. No credible WNBA beat reporter has confirmed any trade discussions. Not a single one. Basketball insiders who are actually plugged into the league's front office conversations openly dismissed the claim as a grab for engagement built entirely on Clark's celebrity and the recent controversy surrounding her. The economic reality alone makes a Clark trade almost impossible to justify. She is the single biggest driver of revenue in the league right now. Her jersey fills stores. Her presence fills arenas, both at home and on the road, where opposing buildings sell out just because fans want to watch her play. Trading that away would be one of the most self-destructive decisions in professional sports history. So no, this trade almost certainly is not happening. But here is what matters far more than whether the rumor is true. The fact that it exists at all, the fact that millions of people saw it and did not immediately laugh it off, says something deeply uncomfortable about how this franchise is perceived right now. When the most recognizable athlete in your sport is the subject of trade speculation barely 10 games into the season, when fans across the country hear the rumor and think, honestly, I could see it, that is a crisis of confidence in your organization's leadership. Clark herself pushed back, making it clear she is not focused on the noise and that the team has each other's backs more than anyone on the outside understands. She has stayed composed, stayed professional, and kept showing up. She is doing everything right. The question is whether the organization around her is doing the same. And looking at how they handled the Portland aftermath, the media manipulation, and the injury controversy, it is fair to wonder. Because there is one precedent that should be keeping everyone in that front office up at night. A precedent they set themselves, not long ago at all. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody in that front office wants to confront. This franchise has every single tool it needs to win a championship. They have a generational point guard putting up career-best numbers. They have a front-court anchor returning from injury. They have veteran scorers developing youth and the deepest roster this franchise has assembled in years. The resources are there. The roster is there. The eyes of the world are watching. But talent without structure is just wasted potential. And right now, the Indiana Fever are the textbook definition of wasted potential. White's coaching resume is real, and nobody can take it away from her. She took Indiana on an underdog run to the WNBA semifinals without an injured Clark. Her teams have reached the semifinals 3 consecutive seasons. That track record earned her this job, and it deserves respect. But past success does not guarantee present compatibility. The same coach who thrived with a defense-first, grinded-out roster in Connecticut is now trying to apply that same philosophy to a team built around the most explosive offensive talent in the league. It is a fundamental mismatch between coaching style and roster identity, and it is playing out in real time every single night. The Fever are not operating like a rebuilding team hoping to find their footing. They are operating like a team that knows it has championship talent and is frustrated it has not reached its own standard yet. But frustration without adjustment is just stagnation. The defensive scheme is not hiding Clark's weaknesses on that end. The offensive system is not fully maximizing what she does better than anyone in the game. The rotation decisions are inconsistent. The culture of accountability, where coaches and executives own their mistakes publicly, is completely absent. Even one of Indiana's own veterans spoke up about a glaring problem. Sophie Cunningham did not hold back when she acknowledged the team is still going through growing pains and called out a major issue with their toughness. When your own players are publicly saying the team is too soft, you do not have a talent problem. You have a culture problem, and culture problems start at the top. The 2026 WNBA is operating on a scale that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. 15 teams, an expanded schedule, massive television contracts, charter travel, and arenas filled to capacity night after night. This is a billion-dollar operation. You cannot run a franchise at this level by sending players to do your press conferences, benching your superstar in a moment of frustration, hiding behind team unity talking points, and then acting like the backlash is everyone else's fault for paying too much attention. There is also a precedent sitting right in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge out loud. The coach before Stephanie White posted a winning record, made the playoffs for the first time in nearly a decade, and showed real signs of progress. It was not enough. The franchise let her go. Right or wrong, that decision established clearly what the Indiana Fever are willing to do when they believe a coaching situation is not moving the team toward a championship. That bar has already been set. The clock is already running. Clark herself has shown more accountability than anyone in this situation. She has looked in the mirror, admitted the team is playing like a 500 team, and publicly stated that she needs to find ways to make things better. That is a franchise player taking ownership. Now the rest of the organization needs to match that energy, not with press conferences managed by players, not with friendly interviews designed to smooth things over for a news cycle. With real structural changes, a defensive scheme that protects its most recognizable face, an offensive system that unleashes her brilliance instead of quietly managing it, a head coach who gives full credit when credit is earned, and a front office that steps into the spotlight when things go wrong instead of pushing players into the crossfire. Because here is the reality. The blueprint to beat this team is already out there. Teams know exactly how to attack the Fever, and they are going to keep running that same play until Indiana gives them a reason to stop. If the coaching staff refuses to adapt, if the front office refuses to act, if the organizational dysfunction keeps bleeding into every game and every press conference, this season will end in the most painful way imaginable. And all of that championship talk, everything Hull said, everything the roster believes it is capable of, will be remembered as the biggest what-if in WNBA history. The biggest question is not whether Caitlin Clark should demand a trade. It is whether this front office has the courage to admit that what they are doing is not working before they waste the most marketable, most electrifying, most valuable player this league has ever seen. Because that window does not stay open forever. Generational talent comes with generational responsibility. And right now, Indianapolis is failing that test. So drop your take in the comments. Are you buying the everything is fine narrative coming out of the Fever locker room? Or do you see the cracks forming the same way millions of other fans do? Is Stephanie White the right coach for this roster? Or is the franchise sleepwalking into the same mistake it made before? And the biggest one of all, if nothing changes by the offseason, does Caitlin Clark eventually start looking for the exit? Because at this point, nobody would blame her. Hit that like button, subscribe if you are not already, and share this one around. This story is far from over. It is only getting started.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.